Chris, and I think we hit the looming expansion of the NFL playoffs from 12 to 14 teams in every way we possibly could, with the exception of one angle that I neglected to mention and didn't organically come up, but it's been hiding in plain sight now that we know that this is something that is going to be part of the new CBA, and it's the reality. The players don't seem to have a problem with it.
No, they don't.
We've heard plenty of times, hey, 17 games, we don't want 17 games. I haven't heard boo about we don't want 14 playoff teams instead of 12. And you'd think that something would have come up if the players had an issue with it, so I can only surmise that they're fine with this.
Yeah, no, it does seem that way, and again, I would like to keep things the way they are. I can deal with this seventh, team in each conference. I don't love it, but I can deal with it. And, the formula, okay. Now, I think the players can get behind this because, it is the playoffs. I think that's the big thing. It gives, two teams an extra chance, an extra crack at the Super Bowl and proving your legacy. And yes, it's a little different than the 17th game of the season where, of course, everybody has to play that. I think, the players can digest this a little bit more because it's an extra playoff check. It's probably more money in the pot altogether all around. And it's a chance to improve your legacy as a player because then you get into the playoffs and that's what people remember for you, those moments. So I think that's probably more than likely the reason the players can get behind it. But you're right. We've heard nothing, no pushback, nothing about this really until yesterday.
And one of the realities is of having only two teams get a bye, the number one seed in each conference, you're going to have 12 teams that potentially will play 21 total games. Not all 12, but if the Super Bowl participant is anyone but the one seed, that team will have played 21 games, Chris.
Yeah, that's where yeah. Sorry.
And soon to be 22, right?
Yes.
And here's the reality. If the next step is what we believe, 17 goes to 18 and 14 goes to 16, you will have every year two teams play 22 total games. It is amazing. When you think about the standard college schedule used to be 11.
Right.
Now, I know it's more than that now, but it used to be 11. Now you're looking at 22 total games. Two teams, obviously not all of them, but every year there'll be two teams that play 22.
It's asking a lot. It is. I was going to say this during the show today, but we had so many different angles and things to talk about. I never got to it, but yeah, that's a dramatic jump. That's a lot of football to be playing. And again, this is going to take years of people's careers away. It's going to do that. Because it's just more opportunity to get hurt too and bang up your body and do all that. And, to your point with college football and everything, they were talking a lot of the last 2 years about, these teams have played 15 games. Never in the history of college football they played 15. Now you're going to up that ante, by 50%. I mean, that to me is just that's crazy, basically. It really is. 22 games. Wow. And the most physical, brutal sport there is right now, that is rough. And, that's a little scary. And, again, it just goes back to a little bit of we talk about player safety, but, and it's getting safer and we're making things go in the right direction. But, these kind of conversations it always seems to go back about, hey, it's okay, we're trying to make it safer, but we just want more money. That's all there is to it. And that's where it seems like it's going.
More money and more things for people to gamble on, which will generate more money as well. They've wanted to expand the regular season for years now, and I think the advent of legalized gambling state by state, and really, look, it's going to be 2021, 2022, or 2023 when the regular season expands. The playoff expansion would begin right away. But as more and more states go online with legalized gambling, that's when we see just the opportunity for the NFL to, Roger Goodell wants to get to $25 billion. This is a way to get to $25 billion. This is a way to get to $50 billion in time, especially when you throw international growth of the league on top of it. And look, here's the reality. I feel like a deal is going to get done soon. And if a deal doesn't get done by the time the NFL sits down with the networks to negotiate new TV contracts, and I don't know whether or not the NFL will do it without a new CBA in place. I know the NFL wants to do it, Chris, with labor peace. But let's assume they don't get a deal done now. and that it all gets tabled until next year when the CBA expires and we get into 2021. There are three general options that we need to be thinking of because there's one specific strategy that I believe the NFL Players Association is bracing for. Now, option one is what happened in 2011. Players get locked out, right? Negotiations continue, players are locked out, and then when the season rolls around and they're looking at missing game checks, they say uncle, and they get a deal done and they come back. The other option is for the players to go on strike at some point. And we know from 1987, something your dad lived through, the strike doesn't work because the players eventually are going to cave, they're going to cry uncle, they're going to come back. The other option is this: negotiate to the point of impasse, contract expires, the league can then implement the last best offer that they made to the players before the impasse was reached. You implement the rules, and the players have two choices: deal with those rules that have been unilaterally implemented or go on strike. Well, they're not going to go on strike. And the concern is that the rules that get implemented come 2021 very well may be 18 regular season games, right? And a lower percentage than what, whatever the best offer is at the time the impasse happens is what gets implemented. And the best offer in August of 2021 may not be as good as the best offer now, precisely because of the impact on the NFL of not doing the new TV deals now when they can strike while the iron's hot. The iron may not be as hot if they do the TV deals next year. So keep that in mind. I think the union is bracing for this possibility of a lesser offer than what's currently on the table being forced down their throats next year.
Yeah.
And they're going to be dared to strike, and they're not going to strike.
That's interesting. Again, this is where you're the man. You're unbelievable with these kind of things, and I can't even digest everything you just said right there. But yes, that would scare me as a player. You're right. And of course, as you've mentioned and we've talked about before, yeah, of course the players are in a, less than advantageous area here. First off, they're football players. And the other side of the table, more times than not, are great businessmen. And the other side of the table have lots of liquid cash to fall on if there is a strike, so they never panic. The other side of the table, only a few guys on every team have enough liquid cash to kind of continue to survive that way. The middle class, the lower class of the NFL, yeah, a year off from missing pay when you're a young guy and you're just starting to accumulate some money and wealth in your life, that's a huge blow to you. And you only have so many years to play football, and that's where players are truly at a disadvantage here, especially compared to the other sports too, especially with no guaranteed contracts or anything like that. And you're right, the players are always gonna fold at some point or another.
And let me tell you something. And this has just kind of occurred to me as you said what you said, and this is why it's good to have a chance to talk this stuff through without having to worry about going to break or anything else. The entire professional sports model, specifically as it relates to football, just doesn't fit with the standard labor management relationship situation, because a strike in a normal business puts a ton of pressure on that business because it's not producing at that point. They go out and hire scabs. It's a hell of a lot harder to hire scabs when you're like a steel making operation or, a more typical company that would have a strike. And you've got all these owners. Number one, they've got their money. Number two, plenty of them are making money off of other business interests anyway. They can easily shut the NFL down for a year and never feel the pain. But for the players, you've got big money that's gone, right? Like if it's a lower paying job, I think in a weird sort of way, it's easier to pay your bills because you're living a more restricted lifestyle anyway.
Right.
If you're living a lavish lifestyle and all of a sudden you've got no money, what the hell do you do?
Yeah, right.
So I really think this, Chris, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole on this. I think the better model for the NFL Players Association long term is to disband and to treat the NFL like 32 businesses, to hold the NFL accountable under the antitrust rules, because the only reason the NFL is allowed to have 32 businesses come together and set all these rules, draft, free agency, minimum salaries, all of that, is because they are collectively negotiating with players. If you get rid of that and you force these 32 teams to truly compete as 32 businesses, and anything they do collectively becomes an antitrust violation, I don't know how it plays out, but I have a feeling it may play out better for the players under that scenario where they have the hammer of antitrust litigation anytime those 32 businesses try to come together and make collective rules. And I think at some point, as this gets bigger and bigger, at some point the players need to have that philosophical conversation as to whether or not they are better off not being unionized, but being in an association that monitors potential antitrust activity, files lawsuits whenever it happens, and treats 32 separate teams like the 32 separate businesses they are.
That's interesting. I mean, that's an interesting take. I mean, I don't know what I'd have to think about that more. I got to think about what the negatives would be for the players if they do that. But you're right. It certainly seems like it would make it harder on owners in these type of situations, because now the onus is on them more instead of just the NFL and the Shield all together helping each other out that way. So, that'd be interesting, Mike. I don't know if their players are quite there yet, but that would be an interesting angle if that came up here in the next few years.
And here's what the biggest negative would be. If it was 32 independent businesses that were all on their own equal footing to do whatever they wanted to do. Look at what the XFL is doing. Look at how little they're paying some of these guys, because the supply of football players who can at least pass the eyeball test, right? They may not be the greatest players in the world, but you put a Chicago Bears uniform on a guy who played at the college level, oh, we're going to watch it. It's the Chicago Bears. He plays for the Bears. But maybe he's going to be making peanuts in comparison to what he's making under the protection of a union. I just feel like there are limitations, because ultimately the players aren't going to use that hammer that most unionized workforces, and it's still a difficult thing for any unionized workforce to go on strike. I just feel like the dynamics and the realities for professional football make it hard. You got a limited career.
Yes.
You've got big salaries.
Right.
It's a lot to sacrifice your football games. You want to play and you want to get paid. And when push comes to shove, the players are typically going to cave in and do what the owners want them to do.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.